It all started in utter silence. No press alerts, no official warnings. Across airspace and cyberspace, an unprecedented multi-front offensive was unleashed with surgical accuracy. The world is still assembling the puzzle of what unfolded and what could be next. Let's uncover it together with Navy secrets. The United States took the first decisive step by deploying 6 B-2 Spirit bombers from Guam, from the gentle-trodden floating solo that was lost in the slow tide on October 4th, 1941. This wasn't just another mission. It was the largest deployment of B-2S since the 2003 Iraq War. Unlike predictions that suggested a launch from Diego Garcia, the aircraft took off from Andersen Air Force Base. This location has robust air defense systems and facilities built specifically for stealth aircraft like the B-2. Immediately after launch, the bombers were refueled mid-air, an uncommon move that speaks volumes. Confirmed the aircraft were fully armed and that this was a time-sensitive operation requiring peak combat readiness. The B-2 remains the only American aircraft that can fly at high altitudes while evading radar and carrying large bunker-busting bombs. But this action from Guam was just the starting point of something far more expansive. Upon reaching target range, the B-2S released GBU-57 bombs, also known as massive ordnance penetrators. Each bomb weighs about 13 tons and is engineered to break through thick layers of reinforced concrete. These are the only known weapons capable of damaging Iran's Fordo nuclear complex, buried almost 300 feet underground. Designed to withstand any conventional strike, Fordo was suddenly vulnerable. Simultaneously, U.S. submarines launched 30 Tomahawk cruise missiles at key Iranian nuclear sites, specifically Natanz and Isfahan. These long-range weapons hug the terrain as they fly, delivering fast and stealthy strikes with exceptional precision. Together, the bombers and missiles executed a coordinated attack that left almost no room for interception. As the smoke still rose from the targets, a bold statement was issued by the White House. Within hours, President Donald Trump made a striking announcement. "Tonight, I can confirm that the airstrikes were a resounding success." He declared the destruction of Iran's most advanced nuclear enrichment centers. Once shrouded in secrecy and fear, these facilities had now, he claimed, been eliminated. To emphasize the gravity of the mission, the White House released photos from the Situation Room. At the center was President Trump, surrounded by his key national security team. Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and others. The images depicted them monitoring the real-time assault, exuding control and determination. This wasn't only a message for domestic audiences, it was directed squarely at Iran, its allies, and observers around the world. The U.S. had just used its top-tier stealth bombers and precision-guided missiles to deliver a crippling blow. And it worked. The operation proved America's ability to act swiftly, strike decisively, and bypass any defense Iran believed would protect it. But as Washington marked a tactical win, another complex front opened, this time led by Israel. As U.S. bombers returned to base, a new wave of conflict ignited. Israel launched its ambitious campaign titled Rising Lion, targeting not only military installations, but also vital components of Iran's national infrastructure. This was no simple airstrike. It was a multi-domain assault involving aerial attacks, cyber warfare, and psychological tactics all at once. Israeli fighter jets struck drone hubs, missile production sites, and radar systems. Simultaneously, elite cyber units penetrated Iranian banking systems and energy grids, causing widespread internet outages and freezing ATM access in major cities. These operations weren't just about hitting hard. They were designed to cripple Iran's leadership's ability to respond and govern. To intensify the pressure, Israel initiated covert psychological warfare, aiming not just to destroy assets, but to destabilize the regime from within. Among the most significant strikes was the one targeting the IR-40 heavy water reactor in Arak, a facility Iran could covertly use to develop weapons-grade plutonium. Although Tehran claimed it had been inactive since 2015, satellite evidence and intelligence reports told a different story. Intelligence sources painted a different picture. The Israeli strike on Arak had a massive impact. The protective structure over the reactor was obliterated, and satellite images captured steam escaping from the core, proving it had been active before the hit. This particular facility enabled Iran to produce weapons-grade plutonium without the need to enrich uranium, offering a quicker route to building a nuclear bomb. Defense analysts say this assault severely set back Iran's plutonium program for the foreseeable future, striking a heavy blow to its nuclear capabilities. But this wasn't just destruction. It was a direct warning. No shortcuts to nuclear arms would be tolerated. However, the most stunning strike wasn't a missile. It was broadcasted into millions of homes. As military targets were being bombed and nuclear facilities destroyed, Iran's national television was suddenly hijacked. Instead of regular programming, the screen showed footage of street protests and a bold call for the public to rise up. The phrase, "rising lion," flashed repeatedly beside angry demonstrators. It was a psychological offensive unlike any before. Iran's own media system was weaponized against its rulers. This wasn't just about crumbling buildings, it was about shaking the regime's grip on its people. The footage stayed live for hours before authorities managed to pull the plug on the country's internet. But by then, the message had already traveled through TVs, phones, and satellites. Once the digital floodgates closed, a broader breakdown began to emerge. Iran wasn't just hit with airstrikes or cyber attacks, it was paralyzed in everyday life. Power outages spread across the country. Banks and digital payment systems ceased operation. Entire cities were plunged into darkness, leaving homes, hospitals, and vital services offline. ATMs stopped working, leaving thousands without cash or access to digital transactions. This wasn't a short-term glitch. It was a calculated blow to Iran's digital and financial infrastructure, leaving the government unable to maintain basic control. With online communications blocked and essential systems failing, the country froze. Students, businesses, and emergency responders were all thrown into disarray. For many Iranians, it felt like time had been turned back, the country dragged out of the modern world in just one night. But the blackout wasn't only electrical, it was emotional. The leadership had lost its hold, and the population could sense it. As Iran plunged into silence, the U.S. acted swiftly, readying itself for whatever might follow. Before the situation even stabilized, the Pentagon began repositioning forces closer to the region. B-1B Lancers and B-2 Spirits were shifted nearer to Iranian territory, supported by aerial tankers to enable extended-range missions. USS forces also pulled back from Qatar and Bahrain, moving into more flexible strike positions. With aeronautical precision, but perhaps the most alarming sign came when the U.S. launched the E-4B Doomsday Plana, flying command post designed for nuclear conflict and full-scale war coordination. This aircraft is rarely used and only deployed during high-level emergencies or major military escalations. Its appearance near the Gulf was a loud signal. America wasn't making empty threats. Simultaneously, U.S. Navy strike groups advanced toward the Persian Gulf, placing aircraft carriers, destroyers, and submarines in strategic positions within strike range. It was clear the U.S. was tightening the noose while keeping its options wide open. Even as American forces prepared for potential escalation, Iran attempted to respond, but with limited effect. Tehran fired Shahab-3 ballistic missiles and launched several drone waves toward Israeli and U.S. targets. However, the majority were intercepted mid-flight. Israel's robust layered defense, including the Iron Dome, David's Sling, and Arrow 3 systems, neutralized the threat before it could cause damage. The plan worked almost flawlessly. Only a handful of Iranian missiles landed, most in barren areas, causing no real destruction. What stunned global observers was the speed at which Iran's launch systems were neutralized. Within just hours of being used, Israeli and U.S. drones had tracked and destroyed the majority of the missile platforms, halting any chance of a second wave. Iran's counterattack appeared more symbolic than tactical, a display of aggression that lacked substance. The second company swiftly called. Military experts pointed out that Tehran's response was far below expectations, sparking concerns over the actual strength of its current capabilities. With major military installations damaged and critical command structures taken offline, Iran appeared immobilized. Anxiety began spreading rapidly, especially within the capital. As airstrikes intensified and defensive systems failed to react, Tehran's vibrant streets turned eerily silent. Footage captured by drones and local security cameras revealed deserted roads, shuttered storefronts, and long lines of cars desperately fleeing the city. The once bustling capital was reduced to a ghost city overnight. Fear ran deeper than explosions. It was fear of the unknown. With communication systems crippled, people couldn't check the news or reach loved ones. The terror wasn't just from missiles, it came from isolation, panic, and the looming uncertainty of what might follow. Some believed the blackout wasn't solely to block foreign information. It was a deliberate attempt to prevent internal rebellion. Iran's silence became more than a tactical gap. It became a symbol of a nation on the verge of collapse, where even its heart, Tehran, offered no safety. While chaos swept through Iran's streets, decision-makers in Washington and Tel Aviv were already preparing for the final stage. The U.S. administration had authorized a complete ground invasion blueprint. Though President Trump publicly praised the success of the strikes, he withheld the final go-ahead, leaving a narrow space open for last-minute diplomacy.